You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. At the start of every week, I sit down with another journalist to talk about the news and how it affects the Pacific Northwest. And my guest today, she is not just a journalist, she is a playwright too. Angela Poe Russell, thank you so much for being here for Front Page.
Thank you for having me, Libby. I'm really excited.
And a lot of people might know you from your TV career, your time in TV news. You've been a contributing host over at KUOW Radio as well. What do you think is like your vibe behind the mic? Do you like being behind the mic instead of in front of the camera?
Oh, I love it. Listen, a lot of people don't know radio was my first love.
Really?
I love the idea that people aren't using their visual senses so they can imagine. It's the imagination. And I can use my hands as much as I want because it annoys no one. But Libby, you should know, like I used to practice on microphones when I worked at Popeye's Chicken at the age of 16 years old.
Yes.
And I'm like, welcome to Popeye. So I love it. I love doing radio, and this is always a lot of fun for me.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes when I go through a drive-through, I'll hear somebody who you can tell is really loving being on the mic. And I'll be like, you need to get into broadcasting. Like they really, people who really just lean into it and ham it up. You're like, oh, they've got a future.
I was that person.
Yep. Okay. So you never know where it will lead you. Angela Poe Russell here with me for Front Page. And we're going to get to our first story of the day, which is about this potential for large new data centers coming to the city of Seattle. So over the weekend, Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson responded to the growing alarm over this in a statement on Facebook. This was posted on Saturday. I'm going to quote it here. I share community concerns about environmental justice, economic resilience, and impacts on increased costs for Seattle ratepayers. That is why my team is working closely with Seattle City Light, City Council, and stakeholders to identify a range of long-term policy approaches, including exploring a moratorium on siting new centers. So really quick, Angela, I'm just going to run through some of these basics here. This is a story that was first broke by Greg Kim of the Seattle Times. And he writes that 4 companies have approached Seattle City Light about building 5 new large-scale data centers. The combined load would be 369 megawatts, which is roughly 1/3 of what the city uses on an average day. Now, a lot of people were concerned. A group called 350 Seattle mobilized a petition drive that got 50,000 signatures, arguing against the possibility of these data centers. And we heard from the mayor basically saying, these have not been approved, first of all, and also we're looking at putting a stop to any new data centers going forward. What do you think about how all of this went down?
One thing I'm appreciating about Mayor Wilson thus far during her term is she doesn't seem to make a rash decision. And I'm noticing that just as an observer, as a resident of the city of Seattle.
On a lot of things, cameras, other issues.
Yeah, listening to all perspectives so that she can make the best possible decision. And it's always a good sign when everyone's mad at you. I observed after one of her decisions that a lot of her supporters were really mad. And there were some other people who didn't think she went far enough. And so I think that's a good sign. To me, that means that you're making an effort to listen to people and make the best possible decision. In terms of what I think about this, after doing my research on data centers, I think a moratorium is a smart idea. I'm not saying a forever moratorium, but enough time for regulations to catch up and for us to put processes in place. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good call, especially as, there were years there, especially like during the pandemic and afterwards when cloud computing became a bigger deal, and then also the AI boom started to demand just more and more of these data centers. And a lot of communities, I think, signed up, many in rural areas, many that were like on the water, on right next to the Columbia River, for example. Quincy, Washington is one. They have a massive amount of data centers. Microsoft has been building there for 20 years. But the building boom just really ramped up there. And a lot of places were giving tax incentives. Washington State gave tax incentives and all that. But the amount of demand that this puts on local energy grids, on the local water supply, because these data centers must be cooled down by water. They require a lot of electricity to run. I don't think that the short-term sugar rush of the jobs that were involved in constructing these data centers necessarily outweigh the long-term issue for ratepayers, issue for, water utility users, things like that. And so going a little slower. The thing is, though, Angela, and I'm kind of fascinated by this, it's like AI is the future. That's what we're being told, right? And these companies need all these data centers. But that's such a macro concern. And like, will that necessarily, the U.S. like winning the AI race, mean anything to somebody living in Quincy, Washington or Seattle, Washington on a day-to-day basis?
To what end? And I want to address that. But first, I just want to validate your concern about the short-term benefit. Is it worth the long-term pain? Because I was looking at the Great Lakes region, which has 20% of all U.S. data centers. And what they found is that there were all these jobs created, right? And tax, revenue, all this stuff. But they said 75% of the impacts came from construction rather than the operation. So once the construction was over, what is this benefit to us long term? So I absolutely agree with that. And then you make a great point. To what end are we doing all of this? I think AI, I'm fascinated with it for scientists. The ability to go through all of this data and help us get to conclusions faster.
Medical research.
Absolutely. But do we need to be taxing our systems, our electrical grids, our water for the purposes of writing our paper faster? So I think some processes would be a wise move, and maybe some boundaries that will say, you know what, this is as much as we're willing to do, because too often our laws and processes don't keep up with what the oh gosh, this is very political. I'm not going to say that. I love when I self-edit on the air.
She's doing a U-turn really quickly.
Some of the corporate folks would like to do for their bottom line.
There are trust issues, right? When you hear something like, this is going to be great for your community. Well, some of these places were the same people who said, social media is going to revolutionize society and it's going to bring so many good things, right? And now we know it sure did revolutionize. But now we know all of the externalities of that, right? And so these are the same kinds of conversations that I think we need to be having way sooner. One thing that did stick out to me, Angela, which I had no idea about. So a lot of these centers have been put so far in rural areas because of the access to electricity and water. But more and more, these companies need to start siting AI data centers in urban areas, because the rural areas are fine if you are just using data centers to train the models. But when you actually want to respond to a query, when Angela Poe Russell is writing to her AI companion, like, tell me, XYZ about whatever. You need to avoid lag to have those data centers closer. So more and more that you're going to see in the Bay Area, in Seattle, in wherever urban areas, more places wanting to build these things. Anything else you want to say on this? I know we are kind of looking ahead and wondering what's next in Seattle. They are looking closely at Seattle City Light, at the contracts, and how these data centers may have to carry more of the load of the electricity use if they do decide to go forward in Seattle, and that's a big question mark.
Yeah, I think what we're all in this is so often as adults, we think we have all the answers, and we do have, hopefully, earned experience and wisdom. But it's been, at least in my family, the young people saying, hey, we need to look out for the environment. They have a future on this planet and they hope to have a productive one. So on this one, I'm like, let's listen to the kids. Let's put some guardrails up on this, because I do think their future is at stake.
Angela Poe Russell, and she's here with me on Front Page. We're going to turn to our second story here. And for that, we're going to have a little bit of an audio journey into the magic of coffee. So you hear the beans being poured, the milk being steamed. I want a latte right now. I'm upset that I played that now. It is the magic of coffee, a new Starbucks ad that came out last month. Angela, are you like a coffee person?
I am not a coffee person, but listening to that, I was like lured into a world that just, and it also reminded me of the power of radio. There's a quote that says, when the eye and the ear compete, the eye always wins. But when you do radio, it forces your attention. And so everything just felt more alive in that clip. Coffee sounds great.
Yeah, coffee. Look, after this, we'll get a coffee. So here's the big question that's been posed recently. Is Starbucks breaking up with Seattle? And what is going on with the new direction of the company as the new CEO, Brian Niccol, tries to turn around some slumping sales and profits? So this conversation has been going on for some time, but it did pick up steam, which is a latte pun.
I love it.
With Paul Roberts, who wrote in the Seattle Times about this. So Starbucks has been doing some real estate shopping around. They have a new fancy office in Nashville. That's for supply chain teams that can house 1,000 to 2,000 corporate employees. Right now, Starbucks has about 3,000 in SoDo, another, several hundred around the Seattle area. And the big question is, are they going to leave town? Because Brian Niccol has been really working on these rounds of layoffs, on finding ways to, trim and cut down on expenses. His Back to Starbucks strategy has included a lot of store closures as well. Now, here's an anonymous quote. I'm going to get to a non-anonymous quote in a second, and you're going to help me with that, Angela. But here's an anonymous quote in Paul Roberts' story. Quote, Brian and his team have been wholly unimpressed by Starbucks corporate culture, said one senior executive in SoDo who spoke on condition of anonymity. Quote, if he could have blown it up and started over when he got here, he would have. So this anonymous quote makes it sound like, Niccol would be very happy with potentially moving the corporate headquarters altogether. Now, we're far from that at this point.
And I just want to interject and say that apparently in his last role I think it was at Chipotle, he moved the headquarters there, right?
Right. To Southern California, to Newport Beach, California, from Denver. Well, so he's known for moving this thing. But now I want to get to a quote that has a name behind it, and this is something you highlighted. It's from LinkedIn, Angela. And what did you find?
Yeah, so just to recalibrate. So we've known about the Nashville thing for a few weeks. So this article happens, and one of their employees posts a reaction to this article on LinkedIn. And Libby, it was specifically the quote where Niccol has been unimpressed with the corporate staff. So Katie Herod, and forgive me if I mispronounce her name, it could be Katie Herod, and she appears to head up global coffee strategy at Starbucks. This is a long response that she put on LinkedIn, but I can tell you that my reaction to it was like, whoa, okay, well, you must be prepared. You must be prepared to
no longer work at Starbucks, potentially.
Because I could see, she basically said that she was grappling with reading about their CEO's disdain for his corporate staff. She said, which we have felt. She said they felt it, but they actually saw it in print. And she said, questioning the quality or effectiveness of corporate teams while those same teams are delivering on your strategy doesn't read as accountability. Ooh. And so I LinkedIn messaged Katie today to see if she
reached out to her.
Oh, I did. Yeah. Just see if she wanted to give a statement, if she wanted to just dig on in. She did not want to give a formal statement, but she just said that her intent for this was, she said, look, we've been through several CEOs in the last 4 years, COVID, tariffs. We are working hard. And she felt like she wanted to be a voice for the partners.
Yeah. Starbucks is also offering, according to Paul Roberts at the Times, hefty bonuses for including cutting staff. I'm just going to read from the bonuses. $6 million in restricted stock grants to Brian Niccol and each of his executive vice presidents if the company slashes $800 million in operating expenses by the end of fiscal year 2027. Now, I should add that Starbucks has said, quote, Seattle remains our North American and global supply headquarters. And they have a very expensive lease in SoDo, that gorgeous reclaimed building with the mermaid at the top.
I love that place. And I hate that they got rid of the roasters. I have not been enjoying the changes as a customer.
I'm bummed.
It's not been as great as I'd hoped it would be. One thing I want to mention that also in this article that you talked about at the top was that the governor was meeting with the CEO, Brian Niccol. And I, as a Washington state resident, I'm like, thank goodness that you're saying, I don't know who initiated the meeting, but I love that they're talking, because the governor needs to hear the CEO's perspective and the CEO needs to hear the governor's perspective and work something out. It's better if we can, minimize the separation and not go to full on divorce.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that's the story in Starbucks so far. Question mark about the future of its headquarters here in Seattle. Although, again, that lease goes through 2038 with no options for cutting things short, apparently. So that would be a big $50 million to eat yearly if that does happen, if there is a full shift away. We'll continue following that. And in the meantime, let's move on to our third story on Front Page.
There's really no smooth or easy way to start this episode off. We are coming here to share a little bit of personal news. We have decided to separate as a couple.
Well, they were Seattle's power couple. Now, Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, who you just heard there, are going their separate ways. The two-time World Cup champion in soccer and five-time Olympic champion in basketball announced on Friday that they're breaking up after almost 10 years. I can see your face, Angela. I know this is a bummer. You heard them on their podcast, which is called A Touch More right there. They're going to be doing 6 more episodes of this and then phasing it out for solo projects. Angela, do you get invested in relationships like this? I mean, how has this news hit you?
I don't get invested in a lot of relationships, but this one hit hard because we had fallen in, I think most of us, many of us, had fallen in love with Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe independently. We respected their careers and their charisma, with Megan, her advocacy. And so it felt like this grand partnership, and they were kind of icons together in Seattle, kind of Seattle royalty.
I can't think of another power couple that was this big, right?
Right?
Yeah.
And then for the gay community, I think it's even another layer of just seeing this, role model couple, if you will. But regardless of who you are, what your occupation, marriage and relationships are hard.
Yeah.
Is hard.
I can second that. I appreciated Stephanie Lowe's commentary in the Seattle Times about their gay icon status and how they were so important to the queer community and why it hits harder there. Lowe wrote, "Together, Sue and Megan were a force to be reckoned with, couple goals for a whole generation of queer women, female athletes, and even, dare we say it, all the straight people, especially because they were the vanguard for an entire segment of women who, through Sue and Megan, finally found the courage to be out, proud, and loud. Amid the often closeted locker rooms of women's professional sports, they smashed the stigma together." But that's a lot to carry.
It's a lot of pressure.
As a couple who are just trying to make things work. And, I'm not saying, poor people who have many successes in life and, are very blessed in many ways. But, that is a lot to carry, to be icons for other people, for the idea of being out and proud. And I'm imagining it's really hard today.
Yeah. Now, listen, I'm not trying to be like, this isn't a gossip show or anything like that. But of course, you get to these spaces and you're like, what happened? Like, people are like, you seem so perfect. Like, what happened? I'm like, was it working together? Was it? Because it's one thing to have your own career. She had her soccer career. Sue had her basketball career. All of a sudden, retirement happens. You're working together.
Which is a huge transition for pro athletes.
To
lose that regular, the training, the spotlight, the outlet, the camaraderie, it's a gigantic transition. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big transition. And then on top of it, they create this great podcast together and they're building this thing. And then it's like, was that... Yeah. I'm at the face of like, what happened? I know that's not our business. It's just whenever you're grieving, you just want to know.
But that's a parasocial relationship, right? That's how these things go. Like, you start to sort of project your own beliefs and like what it means about love and everything like that. I do think we're getting to it's time to leave Sue and Megan alone part of our news cycle, because there are some conservatives who are making hay with this, particularly, I think, because Megan Rapinoe has made a lot of political statements. She was the first, or one of the first athletes to kneel with Colin Kaepernick, to kneel in solidarity with him. She has been really, out about
equal
trans
pay,
issues,
right.
Equal pay. Yeah. Yep. So she goes out there and says her mind. And I think then when people disagree with her, they kind of take this moment to be like, taking pot shots at them. And I think Outsports highlighted some of the ways that there's been, commentary about Megan allegedly recruiting Sue to be a lesbian and
Which
all
is
these
ridiculous. It's all ridiculous, and it's an opportunity to take a shot at Megan, because it shows that when you speak up, and it shows that when you put yourself out there, especially as a public figure, there's a lot on the line. And so to me, it just highlights how brave it was. And I get she will acknowledge she's a person that had some privilege, right? But at the end of the day, she will, for a long time, carry the backlash because of people's hate and disdain for the fact that she dared stand with someone else.
Yeah. I read that. I was like, oh, recruited to be a lesbian? Sure, Jan. That was my response. Sure. Okay, well, let's move on to our last story, because this is going to be a super fun one. And just to set the mood, I'm going to take us back to the 1920s. All right, so Angela Poe Russell.
Yes.
You are a familiar face and voice to many people in Seattle, but they might not realize that in addition to TV news and radio news, you have been doing a different kind of storytelling.
Yes.
Which is at Seattle Public Theater. Yes, go ahead. You've become a playwright.
Yes. Okay. I started on this project, this journey 3 years ago with Amy Poisson from Seattle Public Theater. And at the heart of it is journalists. Our job is to tell stories, to shine a light on areas that need to be elevated. And when I heard the story of aviation pioneer Bessie Coleman, I felt cheated that I had not heard of her before. And the more people I talked to, like, I hadn't heard,
I've never heard of her. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the problem. And so as a storyteller, that's where we were like, let's focus our lens there. And I think there's so many different ways to tell stories. I mean, whether it's in movies, whether it's TV news, radio, and having a background in, I have listen, I'm not the composer. That is the amazing Dion McLean Freeney, who is based in New York City.
You did the books and the lyrics.
I did books and co-lyrics. Yeah.
Okay.
So Dion has carried the bulk of that, but it's been a great partnership. And so why not take storytelling and a little bit of my music background and put it into one, amazing story about Bessie Coleman. And it's called Aviatrix.
And I'm going to get, people information about how they can get tickets, because it's going to debut next month. My question is, were you a musical theater person ever? I mean, tell me more about your musical background.
So when I graduated high school, I had gotten into 2 music schools, University of Florida and Florida State. And being frank with you all, I was scared. I was scared about how I would pay the bills. What kind of career is there for me in music? So I chickened out.
No way.
I know. I chickened out and turned down those offers and decided to pursue a different path that led me to become a journalist. And so I just think this is, I don't know, serendipitous. I don't know if I have the right word for it, but I feel validated as a creator to be honoring that part of myself that loved music and was just scared to take a chance on it. And so I've developed my storytelling skills over time, and so this is the merging of that. But that. What was your question?
Just your journey with music.
Oh,
and did you do musical theater ever?
Here's the funny thing. I didn't even see my first legit musical until my late 20s.
Wow.
A coworker took me to Broadway and I saw Phantom of the Opera and I was in love. And ever since then, I mean, in our house, we are constantly singing musicals. I mean, that is what we do. I was like, why? I mean, I appreciate all the people who just enjoy the plays and the playwriting, but I'm like, come on, when the words fail, music speaks.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes. You want something so badly that you must break out into song to talk about it. It's amazing. So this has been a project that I'm assuming that's been some time in the making. What drew you initially to the story of Bessie and how she was such a pioneering person in flight, Bessie Coleman?
I've always been drawn to people who defy odds and defy expectation. And if you go back to that time in 1920, women, period, were not allowed to go to flight school. Full stop. So if anyone got, like, Amelia Earhart hadn't come on the scene yet at that time. And so they weren't allowed. And the ones that did learn to fly during that time, you either had to have money or someone was privately teaching you. And so the fact that she was able to find a way in the middle of that, I mean, she was a descendant of slaves like grandmother. She was a sharecropper who picked cotton.
Wow.
So I was like, how does a woman go from picking cotton in rural Texas to becoming a phenom around the world? I mean, she was known in France, Germany, around the U.S. as a stunt pilot, and people loved her. And so I was intrigued with, how do you go from that to that, and what does it take? And that feels relevant to me today because so many people face barriers. I mean, that's a common human experience, no matter your race, gender. We all face it. So how do you get over it? How do you get through it?
Wow. And how do you then say, I'm going to write music for, this story? Like, did you know how to do that? I mean, how do you start that?
Okay, so for my process is I start writing the story. And as I write, music comes. And that's where the amazing award-winning composer Dion McLean-Freeney comes in, because I'll have these seeds of an idea and I'll say, Dion, this is what I'm trying to say, or this is what I think it sounds like, or here are some of the lyrics. And she would add her sprinkle dust and we'd have a fusion of a song. And in some cases, I would just set up the scene and she would say, here's what I think goes here. And then we fuss and argue, but in a healthy way, because that tension is good. If you don't have any disagreement in any collaboration, I don't know if it's really a true collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's friction, there can be really great things that come from that, and things that you didn't think of because you have everybody has blind spots, right?
Everyone has blind spots, but it's been a beautiful journey. It's one that. She is someone, the reason I was drawn to her as a composer is because she has a background in not only musical theater, but gospel, opera, jazz. I mean, name a genre and she's done it and done it well.
Mm-hmm. So you had a preview of sorts at the Public Theater, Seattle Public Theater, and this is going to premiere. The world premiere of Aviatrix is coming up on May 15th. It's going to run through June 7th at Seattle Public Theater. What are you doing right now? Is it like in dress rehearsals yet? Or what's the stage at which you're, I don't mean to stress you out, but what else do you have to do, Angela?
Oh, it's a lot to do. Musicals are the biggest collaboration because you have people designing set. You have people creating costumes. You have people designing the lighting. What light will happen for this moment? What color is that light? Where should it be? So we're in the process of rehearsals and we have a band. We'll have like a 5-piece band for this show. So everyone is full on in rehearsals. We're a month out. This is crazy bananas. I've never done anything like this and it is so exciting. And I have to keep reminding myself to enjoy the journey. Do I have time to tell you a funny story?
You have 1 minute exactly.
Okay, I can do this. So our lead came to be, she was actually on the national tour of Les Mis. Wow. And you may wonder, how did she end up coming to Seattle at Seattle Public Theater? Well, it goes back to taking a chance. When I was in high school, there was a star basketball player, and we were never friends. We just had classes. So one day I see on Facebook that he has this amazing daughter who can sing. And I thought, well, she wouldn't want to do this. She's like traveling the world doing Les Mis. And so I said, well, okay, well, just message him and ask. So I messaged him. And I asked her if she wanted to audition. And she said yes. And then she, I guess, liked it enough to say yes to the show.
Oh, my gosh.
Haley Dorch is our Bessie Coleman. And we're just glad to have her beautiful energy and her talent.
SeattlePublicTheater.org if people want to find more. Any other way to follow you? Angela Poe Russell?
Yes. SeattlePublicTheater.org/Aviatrix. And we also have Aviatrix Musical on Instagram. And we hope you'll get tickets.
Incredible. You're listening to Soundside. Thanks to Angela Poe Russell. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.